What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jack, and today I've got another civil service type video where I'm going to share my experience of doing a presentation for an interview I did a few years ago. Now, I know a lot of you have been asking me to do a presentation themed video, but instead of giving you a generic video where I talk about presentation good practices, I thought it'd be a really good idea to share my experiences of doing one of these presentations a few years ago. So for those of you who maybe don't know yet, sometimes the civil service will ask you to do a presentation regarding one of the behaviors, or maybe I've heard some people say that they'll ask you to just talk about yourself. Now, I was asked to do a presentation regarding seeing the bigger picture, and I won't do the specific question, but it was generally along the lines of, can you give us a 5-minute presentation talking about how you would introduce a new strategy to the organization? And from my experience, you are only given 5 minutes, you are not allowed slides, and you're not actually given much in terms of context for the presentation. So yeah, you're not really given a great deal, to be honest with you. The first piece of advice I would give you is, if this presentation is regarding a behavior, for instance, mine was talking about seeing the bigger picture, it's important to put your hat on for that specific behavior. So for myself, regarding the question of how would I introduce this new strategy, I was always thinking of the holistic view. We love that word holistic in the civil service. I don't know why. It doesn't really mean a great deal. It just means kind of the whole picture, but you know what I mean. Holistic view of seeing everything through the wider organizational lens. When I was giving my presentation, when I was preparing, I was thinking in terms of wider organizational impact and how this affects the ability of the organization to hit its goals. So when it came to structuring and preparing for this presentation, I made sure to think of it through the see the bigger picture lens. You're not allowed slides, and it's only 5 minutes from my experience. So this means you don't need this huge introduction. Remember that the panel have already read your CV. They've already probably had a chat with you before the interview process. So there's no real need to spend a few minutes introducing yourself, saying this was your background, this is my work experience, because the presentation isn't actually assessing that. The presentation is usually assessing the behavior which they've asked you to talk about. So yeah, there's no need for a huge intro. Just get straight into the content. You've only got 5 minutes after all. Before it came to giving my presentation, during my preparation, I made sure that I scoured the internet for any publicly available documents that related to the organization, so that I could get an idea of what strategies were currently in place, what things people may be happy with and not happy with. And I also thought it was important to show the interview panel that I had researched the organization. Throughout my presentation, I then peppered in bits of research that I'd done in preparation, and I think this went down well and helped me get very good scores. Another bonus is, if you know someone who already works at that organization, and if you don't, get on LinkedIn and maybe start networking with people, then hit them up and ask them, look, I've got this presentation about this, do you know anything about the topic, etc. It's always really, really handy if you know someone who can kind of shed a light on a few things. So yeah, I would highly recommend in your preparation, try and network with someone who maybe works there already. So after I'd already done this preparation, I'd spoken to a few people, luckily, who already worked there, I decided to structure my presentation using the rule of threes. So it's been proven that the rule of threes is really good for presentations, and just generally we seem to remember things in threes. So I decided to structure my presentation with 3 main points, and then for each main point I decided to talk about 3 sub-points. When it comes to the presentation itself, I would highly recommend that you don't script. Instead, you should use guides. You should just use talking points that enable you to get talking and kind of into conversation, because there's nothing worse than someone who's looking down at their notes and it just feels scripted. I think the entire point of not having slides is that so you don't hide behind slides, because particularly in these remote working and remote interview environments, I think people have a tendency to hide behind their slides. So for my question, based upon how would I introduce this new strategy into the organization, my first point was that I wanted to discover why we were introducing this strategy in the first place. I wanted to know what were the good things, what were the bad things, when was it introduced, and why did we need a new strategy, essentially. I wanted to do my research within the organization, within this new role that I was going into. That was point number one. The second point was that I wanted to then do my user research and meet with stakeholders and engage with people and discover what people like, what people don't like, what needs to be in this new strategy, what hasn't worked in the past, and just get a sense of what is working and what isn't working. So the second point was user research, getting feedback from people. And then three, finally, I would then base my proposal from the evidence that I've collected and from the feedback and from the conversations I've had with people. I would then look to other government departments and other companies to see how they were approaching these strategies. And then I would form a proposal based upon this, based upon evidence. So you'll notice here that my 3 points were very simple. It was, I wanted to find out why we needed this new strategy and what the aims of the strategy were. The second thing was I wanted to gather feedback and do my user research to discover what has worked well and what hasn't worked well and what people want going forward. And then the third point was how I would form my proposal based off these previous discussions and the things that I'd found out in my discovery phase. Now, notice that I said I was going to structure my presentation into 3 points. And notice how those 3 points aren't particularly groundbreaking. All I'm doing is talking the interview panel through my thought process. I think you should take this into account. I think a 5-minute presentation isn't designed to test whether you know everything and whether you can do everything straight away. I think it's more around seeing your thought process. So now, once I've got those 3 main points, I would then use 3 sub-points for each of the points. In the first phase, when I'm going to talk about what are the aims of the strategy, what do we want to achieve, I would talk about 3 things for that. And then the second point, where I do my user research and I get feedback from people, I would talk about 3 points there. Maybe I'm going to do some surveys, maybe I'm going to do some focus groups, and then something else. And you'll be surprised that 3 points and then 3 talking points for each of the main points. How many times can I say points in a video? We'll see. You'll be surprised that 5 minutes will absolutely fly by. And I think it worked quite well for me. I think it's a good guide. In my opinion, I don't think you should use a script. I think it is far better to use talking points. And pro tip, if you do have an external monitor, put your work laptop or your Surface or whatever you use in front of your external monitor, and then you'll have your talking points behind the camera. So instead of looking down and reading from your notes and reading from a script, you can just, instead of looking eye contact, you can just look up and it just looks like you're taking a break from eye contact. If you are allowed slides, then I would highly recommend just use images and maybe some sentences. Do not load your slides filled with text because that defeats the point of it. Remember that you yourself, you are the presentation. Your slides are not the presentation. Your slides are there just as a tool. You should not be reading from the slides. You should be presenting and then using the slides to reinforce the things that you were saying. I hope this video helped. Obviously, I cannot be specific because I've only done one of these presentations, and I'm sure that every single department asks different questions and asks you to do different presentations, but hopefully you can take a few small tips from this video. For more civil service content, check out my playlist here. There are a load of videos and I have helped a lot of people now get jobs, which is really, really cool. I am getting messages from all of you daily saying that these videos have really helped you. I'm more than happy to keep making them, so let me know if there's any more that you think would be helpful down in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed, as always. Thanks very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers.